What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
I don't know about, listen to me. Can I get a word in edgewise?
No.
This is like one of my favorite times of the whole fortnight is
Fortnite. Have you just time traveled from the 1700s?
Are you
my
kidding
wife
me?
still uses the term fortnight.
The term Fortnite, my kids use the term Fortnite 40 times a day. Dad, can I play Fortnite? Dad, can I play Fortnite? Dad, can I play
Not
Fortnite?
that kind of fortnight. Anyway, it's one of my favorite times of the entire 2 weeks.
Of the fortnight. I'm going to use that phrase now as many times as I can.
Guys, it's 1 o'clock. Let's get started.
Wait, whoa, you go.
What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
In case you missed that, that's our new jingle. We're so excited. That was Richard and Michael singing.
Yeah, I love
it. We need to get the straw hats and the canes. I don't know what era that's like the 1920s or 30s or something.
Anyway, welcome everybody to the personal side of business is what we're calling this week's episode. We're so excited to have everybody here. Please put in the chat box where you're located. We'd love to know. For some reason,
on the
Mike
chat
is focused
box
on the temperatures. Well,
remember to send the chat to everyone, not just
Sanjay.
Am I doing that? Public service announcement. If you will notice, folks, that by default, your chat goes to only the panelists, and we would ask you to hit that little drop-down menu so it says to and everyone, so we can share from everyone's expertise and knowledge, even Michael's.
Yeah, excellent. So very quickly, would you introduce yourself, Richard?
Hi, I'm Richard Hadden. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm not going to tell you what the weather's like about here today because I want to remain popular. But I am the co-author of Contented Cows Still Give Better Milk, and I speak to audiences all over the place about employee engagement, leadership, and now a lot with recruiting and retention. Who's next? Sanjay.
Oh.
Me.
Sanjay.
Sorry. I'm Sanjay.
Wakey.
Oh, I thought you were talking to the other Sanjay on the call. My bad. My name is Sanjay Knapp. I'm based just outside of Toronto, Ontario. I specialize in performance and leadership with organizations. I do that via speaking and some coaching. And I will pass it over to Michael. Michael, motorcycle.
Hey, Michael Kerr here, coming to you from Canmore, Alberta, in the beautiful, spectacular Canadian Rockies, where there is not a cloud in the sky today. It is absolutely stunning. I speak about humor in the workplace and rocking, inspiring workplace cultures. And I have a private message for one of the participants. I don't know if she's on yet or not, but I don't hate cats.
Good to know.
Are you talking the animals or the musical?
Good to
know.
I
I did hate the musical, to be honest. But
thank you, guys. I'm Jeff Tobe, coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I am a professional speaker and author like all of these guys. And I'm very excited, guys. I know I shared it with you. I haven't shared it publicly, but I got this this past week.
Oh.
It is actually just a prototype of my new book called The CX Edge. Very excited. It'll be out next month, so stay tuned. Before I introduce our wonderful guest today, let me first put in a plug. I want to tell everybody that we've got a new concept that if you're interested in, reach out to us. And that is that we would love to come to one of your company functions. That's right, all four of us. And we will customize it for your organization. We'll interview your CEO, poor CEO, and we would love to do that. So I just wanted to mention that as a public service announcement. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Maya Nicole. Welcome, Maya, first of all.
Thank you.
You know, Maya is a coach and a speaker. She's got a passion for awareness. Mike's dancing for you.
Mike, calm down. Calm down.
Yeah, really. A passion for awareness, emotional intelligence. She received her bachelor's degree in psychology, her master's degree in social work, and she's really with a focus in counseling. She left the mainstream therapy path, I guess you'd say, to explore and master more alternative, intuitive approaches to emotional healing, such as shadow work. Let me know if I get this wrong. Inner child work and somatic work.
Today, I'm impressed how you're doing this.
All right. Today, she guides her clients to heal and rewire thought and behavioral patterns from the root of where they stem so they can find empowerment, authenticity, fulfillment, and most important, joy in their personal and professional lives. In her spare time, I happen to know that Maya is happiest surfing the waves near her home in Maui. No, that is not a virtual background, I'm afraid to say. And let me just add something that's not on her bio. I happen to know that Maya is a loving, caring, strong-willed, passionate, strong-willed, socially responsible, dedicated, and did I say strong-willed woman? Because Maya is my daughter. So I'm so excited to have her here today. Welcome.
What? Is this one of those reveal shows where we just find this out?
Yeah, I got the envelope right here. I just opened it before the show started. And Maya, you are my daughter.
Papa, Papa.
It's you.
So we want to talk about the personal side of business today. So I know everybody came armed with questions. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. I know that there's a lot of relationship between emotional intelligence and work, and it's a very new field, right? It only kind of gained popularity in Goldman's book, 25 years ago, but it's been around before that, probably 30 years before that. But my big question for you is just to kind of kick things off is what the heck is emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So emotional intelligence is such a big concept. And so I really like to break it down into a few different parts, but we can't really talk about emotional intelligence without talking about self-awareness. They go hand in hand. And so when we talk about emotional intelligence, we have to look at our wounding. And I'm going to dive into that a little bit before we go on with the emotional intelligence. So when we're kids in our childhood, we all go through traumas, and these traumas can be what in the psychology world we call big T traumas, which are really overt, obvious traumas, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all of these traumas that our society deems as traumatic. But we also go through things that are called little T traumas, which are a lot more covert, which sometimes when we look back at our childhood, we don't even realize we went through, but it's more of like tiny little emotional woundings along the way that we kind of pick up. And so all of these traumas that we go through, whether they're big T or little t, cause us to develop certain behavioral patterns, certain thought patterns, certain ways of reacting, certain ways of relating to people. And in our adult life, we're essentially just playing out these patterns and these behaviors over and over again unconsciously. And so really what emotional intelligence is understanding first our wounding from our childhood, and then to take it further, understanding how that wounding causes us to act in relationship or act in our life. And oftentimes when we don't have emotional intelligence, our wounding is running the show. And when our wounding runs the show, we end up hurting other people. We end up hurting ourselves. And so really what emotional intelligence is first the self-awareness of where our wounding comes from and what it is. And then it's really like doing the work on the wounding to heal it, or at least to just become aware of it. And so in that we become in control of it rather than letting it have control of us. And so with emotional intelligence, there's kind of like these three aspects to it. The first is really working through our wounding. And the way that I do this with my clients is through shadow work, inner child work, and somatic work, which we can talk a little bit about in a bit if anyone's interested. And then the other part of it is learning how to catch when we're triggered. So when we're triggered, it means that something or someone outside of us kind of like, I like to say, poked at our wounding, and it causes an activation in us. And if we don't have the self-awareness and we don't have the emotional intelligence that I'm talking about, we react poorly usually when we're triggered. And it's hard for us to handle. It's hard for people around us to handle. So the triggering is a huge part of this emotional intelligence. And then the third part of emotional intelligence is really graceful communication. So once we understand our wounds, once we understand our triggers, and we have the skills to be able to have control over them, we also are able to communicate more gracefully with the people around us. We're able to express to them what's being triggered before it comes out as a reaction to them. So there's all these little spaces there's all these little directions that emotional intelligence can go in, but really it's this self-awareness and understanding our childhood wounding and not letting it run the show.
Hey, quick little follow-up question, because you said there's kind of two styles. Everyone, basically you're saying we're all messed up. We all have trauma,
Yes.
if I'm paraphrasing. And then there's little trauma, death by 1,000 paper cuts, and then there's big trauma. So in your experience in this world, where do you find the majority of people fall, or is there no pattern to it? Are more people death by 1,000 paper cuts, or more people I was hit by a bus?
It's an interesting question. Because of the field that I'm in, I would say I see more people with the big T trauma, because those are the ones that are typically seeking the therapy and seeking the counseling and everything. But if I take a step back from my profession and I look at just people around me, it's more little T traumas for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
The little traumas are more common.
And by the way, I don't know if you see the comment in the chat box says only our last president had emotional intelligence. You don't have to go any more than that. That's all you have to do. Leave it at that.
Well, and the other thing with this is that even people that have the big T traumas have a lot of little T traumas too. So I would say the little T traumas are much more common.
Maya, what's an example of a little T trauma?
It's a great question.
Because I don't think I had any of the big T traumas, but there's got to be something that explains why I am the way I am.
How much time do you have, Richard? We can answer that for you.
What are the little T's?
So before I answer that, it's interesting. I sometimes have people come to me and they're like, my life doesn't feel good, but I had an amazing childhood. I'm like, let's go into that and let's double check that. So yeah, so an example of a little T trauma would be, let's say that a child is angry. They're having a little temper tantrum, they're angry. And the child's parent says, go to your room, that's not acceptable behavior, shut the door, I'm gonna lock you in there until you can come and speak to us calmly.
I asked you not to use an example of me.
So back when I was a child, you know, like in my generation, that was considered good parenting. It was like, let the child cool off and then they can come out. But in looking back at that, what's being communicated to the child in that instance is your anger is not acceptable. Your feelings are not acceptable. I don't know how to handle your feelings, and you can only get love and connection when you feel good. So what's going to happen is that child's going to grow up suppressing his or her anger, not knowing what to do with it, and it's going to live inside of his or her body and come out in different ways.
And then what occurs to me is then these people come to work in organizations, and we all have these things and we have to deal with them. And many people are not even, I guess what you're saying is many people haven't figured themselves out, let alone to be able to help others.
Yeah. So exactly. So what happens is, like, when all of these emotions get suppressed in our childhood and these traumas get suppressed because we didn't have adults who knew how to deal with them and care for us in them, they get projected onto the people around us when we're not aware of them and we don't have any avenue to let them come out. They get stored in our body and they get projected in other ways.
So Carol's asking, what would have been the better way to handle the situation?
That's such a good question. So a better way to handle that situation would be to get on the child's level. So really, when a child is acting out in any type of emotion, what they're really needing is nurture, non-judgment, understanding, and presence. And that's actually, as adults, what all of our emotions need. That's a whole other conversation. So the better way to handle that is to get on the child's level. And it's called mirroring, where you mirror back to the child, I see that you're very angry. You validate. I understand why you're angry. If this happened to me, I would be angry too. Can we just be in your anger together? I'm right here with you. And you let the child play out the anger, really. And you create kind of like this safe space for the child to play it out. And then you offer maybe techniques. Let's breathe together. Let's just take a breath together. Or what is it that you're needing from me right now?
I'm smiling because at least three of us, I don't know about Sanjay, are thinking right now, oh yeah, I could have seen my mom and dad doing that.
No way. This is such a new paradigm of parenting. It's called emotional parenting.
You say we know that, but we didn't know that then. My parents didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
But you know, the reality is we make the best decisions we have with the information we have in the given moment. So I tell you, 30 years from now, they're going to look back at this and go, mirroring, are you nuts?
Exactly.
Like, you emotionally scarred your child. Anyway, so but that's, we'll come back in 30 years to talk about that. Another question from the chat box from Cheryl said, where would you place generational trauma, epigenetics, and neurobiology, and how would you address those?
So those are all very, very real things too. So there's kind of like two sides to this. There's the childhood trauma that we go through when we're children, and then there is the generational trauma, which is a big conversation, and it's really the trauma, the memory of trauma that we're carrying in our DNA from past generations. So we didn't even have to be alive, but it gets passed on to us through DNA. And so when I'm working with clients, this is what I find. I find that generational trauma that's stored in our DNA also is passed on to us in our childhood more by our environment too. So it's like when it's inside of our parents, it kind of gets put into our environment as well. So as we're doing the inner child work and we're going back into the childhood, that generational trauma is really like mixed into that because it's so alive in our household. But sometimes when I have people go back into memories, they have these memories that they don't even know if they really happened. And so sometimes there is generational trauma that's coming up in their memories that didn't happen physically to them, it happened to their ancestors. So like I said, that's a whole other conversation. It's a really deep one. But their generational trauma and ancestral trauma is so real.
And Maya, just for clarification, because people are asking the question, it's not that you remember what happened to your great-great-great-grandparents. You don't remember any details, but I think what you're saying is the trauma, we know this, trauma changes us physically.
Yes.
And then those changes can be passed on from generation to generation. And then those changes end up in a child. And so they don't remember the details, but the physical damage has been done. Okay.
100%, yes.
Yeah. So I think we want to start to, we're here obviously talking about corporate culture and relating that. Mike, do you have any question?
I do. Yeah. Before I get to my main question, though, I've got several questions. I'm just obviously using the word trauma is a very negative term, right? We're talking about negative impacts in our childhood. But of course, we are all shaped as adults, as leaders, by everything that happens in our childhood, including the positive stuff. And so is it fair to say that positive influences as well still, of course, shape our personality, our outlook, and that overall package contributes to assumptions we might bring to the workplace or unwritten rules? I talk a lot about unwritten rules. So before I get to my other question, I'm just curious to know your thoughts about how perhaps our whole past experience contributes to us developing unwritten rules about how we operate in the world.
100%. So it's, we are a makeup of the negative things and the positive things equally. And, these things that get ingrained in us in our childhood, these beliefs, these patterns, not all of them are bad. Some of them really serve us. And even the ones that are bad or negative have kind of like a light side. So for example, as a child, if we, for some reason, had to grow up too fast, mature too quickly, take care of a parent or take care of another sibling who maybe had a disability or was sick, this happens a lot. What happens is we become very organized, very proactive. We become the one who deals with all of the problems very easily and very quickly. And so while that is a detriment to us in some ways, it's also very positive. We're the doers, we're the ones who get stuff done. They're the ones who are organized, who are the leaders. So there's light and dark sides to all of what I call our shadows. Right. And all of those light and dark things really make up who we are and are the unwritten rules.
So bringing it.
And say that proud mama just walked into the video, and so
I thought that was proud mama.
She's got the whole family here.
Hey, proud mama.
Hi.
Hello. So Maya, bringing it back to the workplace and leadership and culture and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Why is learning about emotional intelligence important for leaders? How can it benefit them? And how do you maybe go about selling it to some leaders who might view this as fluffy, soft skill kind of stuff?
It's like so alarming to me that some people view it as fluffy, soft skill. I understand why. And in my experience, when we have this self-awareness and this emotional intelligence, it literally changes everything in our lives, everything. And the biggest thing that it changes is our relationships. And our life is made up of our relationships. Our work, our professional life is made up of our relationships. And when we have really high emotional intelligence, our relationships are so much better. They're so much higher functioning. And when our relationships are good, we have such a higher quality of life and a higher quality of work experience. And so really it changes the quality of our experiences when we have emotional intelligence. And what I've found through this work for myself and with all of my clients is that emotional intelligence really leads us down a path to compassion for ourselves. When we understand why we are the way we are, why we're acting the way we act, why we've done the things that we've done up until this point, we really start to develop this sense of compassion for ourselves. And when we have that compassion for ourselves, we can also have that compassion for other people. So what I find when we want to relate this to the workplace is that when you're a leader and you're leading a lot of people, it's really helpful when people are acting in their behavioral patterns, which everyone does, when we can see, oh, that's a wounding, or that's their little boy coming out, that's their little girl coming out. It allows us to relate to them in a different way. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that I feel that we're moving into this new sort of paradigm where authenticity is becoming and is going to be one of the most cherished and important parts of business and relationships in business. And I think that people for so long have had this idea, we've been taught that we have to go into work or we have to go into our profession with this mask on. We have to put our personal lives aside. And
well, we do right now, yes.
Yes, and this is so common, and it's funny when I go into workplaces and I see how people are acting. It's just like mask. No one's really being authentic, and I think that especially these younger generations who are coming into the workplace are really craving to be seen and heard and understood, and really want to be able to express themselves in a way that feels good, where they don't have to really put on this mask. If they're having a bad day, they can say, hey, I'm having a bad day. This is how I'm feeling. So a little bit more feeling oriented. I mean, we're not going to come into work and break down crying, but at least having like this avenue where there's a leader who says, hey, what's going on? And you feel comfortable telling him or her. And there can be teamwork around that to deal with it, because we all have these things. We're all human.
You know, Maya, I think one of the challenges, and I won't call it fluff, Mike, but I think it's just kind of empathy comes to mind, right? An empathetic leader. And empathy sometimes translates to vulnerability. And so, you know, a lot of leaders are afraid to be vulnerable. And yeah. I'm curious what your thoughts, you know, empathy, vulnerability, what are your thoughts that you could share?
I think that also in the old paradigm that we're speaking about, emotions and vulnerability was seen as weakness. And obviously, if someone's a leader, he or she doesn't want to be seen as weak. And so what's starting to shift right now, and what I would love to see shift more and more in the workplace, especially, is this idea that vulnerability and honesty and transparency and emotion is strength. I mean, the reason that we don't share these things is because it's scary, it's hard. And so if we look at it in this way, it takes so much strength to be able to maintain your empowerment and also say, I'm struggling. Right. Yeah. And so we have to shift this idea that vulnerability is weakness. And I think in my experience, when I've been around leaders who are vulnerable, it makes them so much more relatable. It makes me have more respect for them. And maybe that's just because of my background and who I am, but that's really where I would like to see this go, is is considering people who are willing to be vulnerable, leaders especially, as strong and having more respect for them in that.
Great way to look at it.
I talk about this, Maya, in the context of humor sometimes with leaders too, because we know from several studies that we tend to trust people more, trust leaders more who share a healthy sense of humor. And part of that is, I believe, is because humor helps people remove that professional facade, that professional serious mask that they wear at work. And they do something stupid and they're able to laugh at themselves, and they become more human, they become more real and genuine.
Which is that's vulnerability right there.
Yeah.
So exactly. And the other piece of this is like, when a leader has emotional intelligence, he or she is willing, if you have emotional intelligence, you're willing to take ownership of your actions and your reactions and what you did and what you said. And when a leader can take ownership for themselves, I think that elicits a lot more connection and a lot more respect with the people that they're leading.
I think that that's one of the big blessings, by the way, COVID's given us, this idea of vulnerability and professionalism and the facade we wear, right? Because hypothetically, like a proud mama could walk into the screen of someone doing a podcast and it's not a big deal, right? A little kid could walk in holding their diaper. The cat could walk across the keyboard, and apparently Mike doesn't hate cats, but whereas before it used to be a big, faux pas. Now people are like, yeah, that's how it is in my house. That stuff happens, and people accept it. And you know what? Yeah, I may be a superstar at work as a salesperson, but I
have to take the trash out on Tuesday mornings. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Maya, I in comparing emotional intelligence to, what do you call intelligence? Intellectual intelligence. Okay. In comparing that, I think with the intellectual intelligence, I have pretty much maxed out, okay, at where I'm ever going to be. But with emotional intelligence, can it be developed? If I don't have a lot of emotional intelligence, can I develop it?
100%. And that's what all of my work in this world is around, is helping people, guiding people into deeper and deeper self-awareness and emotional intelligence.
So Maya, sorry, Richard, to interrupt you. So I think we would all agree Richard can develop it more, but Sanjay?
You know what? I was going to jump in and pick on Jeff, but you beat me to the punch, so I'll take it.
I'll be the judge of that. But you've talked several times about self-awareness, and I'm no expert on emotional intelligence, but I am a consumer of that information, and I've done a lot of reading about it because I find it very interesting. The reason I find it interesting is because I find that what I read, I see it actually borne out in life with people, and I say, yeah, I think there's really something to this. And so self-awareness, and one of my favorite memes that I ever saw on Facebook, I only search the very, very highest order of input on things. One of my favorite memes was something that said, the problem with people who lack self-awareness is they don't even know it.
Yep.
You have to kind of think deeply about that one. But I have tried to develop a little bit more self-awareness. I know I'm not doing great right now, but you should have seen me before. But I really have done it. And I also recognize people who don't seem to have much self-awareness, and I am able to offer them a little bit more grace, because I think that may be the reason that they are behaving the way they are behaving.
100%. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the compassion piece, is like, when we have a little bit, even just a little bit of self-awareness, we start to have more compassion for the people around us. But this is interesting with what you're saying. So this came through to me actually in a meditation. And I think this is so important when we're talking about increasing our emotional intelligence. So what I discovered is that there are 3 phases that we have to go through every time we're learning a new lesson. And these lessons are where our emotional intelligence and our self-awareness come from. The first phase is the knowledge phase. So that's kind of what you're explaining. The knowledge phase is like where you're reading the books, you're listening to the podcasts, you're watching the YouTube videos, you're gaining all of this information. And that's such an important phase, but that's where a lot of people stop. And so there's a lot of people walking around with all this knowledge, but they don't know what to do with it. And so what I've found is that the second phase is the integration phase. where we're taking that knowledge and we're doing the actual work on ourselves. We're applying it to ourselves. This is where the shadow work comes in, the inner child work comes in, the somatic work comes in. We really have to digest the information and apply it to ourselves. So that's the integration phase. And then the third phase is the embodiment phase. And that's really where my goal is to get all of the people that I work with, because this phase is where we show up in the world as the evolved version of ourselves, the one who went through the integration. So I think a lot of times those last two pieces are really missing. And so the knowledge is great, but it doesn't really do much for us. It does a little bit, but it doesn't do much if we don't go through the integration and the embodiment as well.
I think what you're saying too, I've said it in a different way. I've never liked the term motivational speaker. When people call, I'm sure everyone on this call has been a motivational speaker at some point. And the reason I don't like it is because that to me is about, using your language, it's the knowledge phase. It's an external force that pushes us to learn something or to do something that we intellectually know we're supposed to do, but we don't have the emotional ownership to actually do it. And so once you learn the skill, that's great. And they say knowledge is power, and that's crap. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge lets you do well in Jeopardy. Applied knowledge is power. But once you get that internalized, then you move from motivation to inspiration. And inspiration is, it's an internal driving force. It says, get the hell out of my way because I'm doing this. You don't need to remind me. So if you don't want to work out in the morning, you need a motivational coach. You can do it. Come on, 5 more. Come on. Or that's the supportive one. Then there's the yellow, you piece of crap, do it because you suck. So you have different styles of coaching. But when you get to the point where it's internal and you've embodied it, then you don't need to tell me. I wake up and I don't have to do it. I get to do it. And 100%. So, yeah.
It's so true.
I've seen you speak, Sanjay, so I understand your reluctance to use that term.
But he's not a motivational speaker. Let's take a bit of a tangent, because I'm curious. There's probably a lot of people on the show today participating who have gone through conflict at work, confrontation at work, maybe haven't done the work that you're talking about. So I'm curious if you have any advice for people when it comes to confrontation or conflict at work, how they can kind of access that emotional intelligence that they may not have worked on in the past. What advice would you have, Maya?
If there hasn't been any work done on their emotional intelligence, it's going to be really hard to access.
Well, after today, they're now aware of it, at least.
Yeah. So I guess the easiest route to go in that situation is to learn communication skills. There's something that's called nonviolent communication. It's a whole realm of a communication style, and I highly recommend
smiling,
that.
Right?
Yeah,
this is a wonderful course. If anybody if you haven't taken it, nonviolent communication, I'm taking a 12-week course. It's just wonderful.
It's amazing.
So I want the 3 of you to remember that when you're talking to me, okay?
Okay.
So that's a little bit of a more, I don't want to call it surface, but it's an easier thing to absorb and a quicker thing to absorb than emotional intelligence. And it gives a lot of tools as to how to communicate in conflict. So it's a really great place to start. But to answer your question, if someone's in conflict in the workplace or they've been in conflict, a great question to ask yourself is, why is this activating me so much? Like there's something that it's poking at within me, and that thing that it's poking at goes way, way beyond this conversation or this conflict. And so it's a good question to ask. Why is this activating me so much?
Well, and Maya, I would just add to that too, that I find it really helpful to also just to go into that curious space, right? When somebody is, from my perception, overreacting to a situation, to step back and just get curious for a moment and think, okay, why is this person reacting like this? There's more going on underneath the surface.
And I think the real power too in that is it's not about the person, it's about you, right? So you have much more control. It's not like, he's acting like a jerk. It's like, hold on a second. What have I done to contribute to this? And, they have their triggers. And so I'm going to meet other jerks like that. So I love how it becomes personal ownership and not playing victim.
And yes. And the other thing that's really helpful in this is, like, if you have two people who are not very emotionally intelligent having a conflict, it's like they're two little kids fighting, trying to get something that they didn't get as children. And so oftentimes in conflict, if I'm watching it or if I'm part of it, I like to take a step back for a moment and watch it like a movie. This is a good tool. So if you're in conflict, if you can take a step back for a moment and watch it like a movie, you will pretty easily see the two children going at each other in the situation, and you can see their little wounds coming out at each other. And the other thing I wanted to comment on was, Mike, you said the word overreacting, and this is so important, is there's actually no such thing. So when someone reacts to something, they are reacting exactly how you should react if you have the wounding that they have. Right? So this is important to remember in conflict. If someone seems like they're overreacting, all that's doing is showing us how deep that wound is. They're reacting appropriately for how deep that wound is for them.
I guess they're overreacting by our standard.
Exactly.
We would not react in that way to the same stimulus as they are.
Exactly.
And the reaction may not be because of something from, I would suggest, 20 years ago that happened. It could be from something that happened that morning. Right? Or last night, or a pattern of behavior, or an unwritten rule, or an assumption that has led them to react in the way that they did.
Yeah.
Right? I want to circle back quickly, if we have time, Jeff, to your thought about authenticity, or and we all talk about that, right? And it's become such a buzzword, authentic leadership. The conversation I get into very often, though, with workplace leaders is, yeah, well, the problem is Bob is very authentic. He's being himself all the time. He just happens to be a jerk 24/7. So he's still bringing his authentic self to the workplace. It's just not a very nice self. So you know, how can we frame that in a better way when those conversations come up?
How can we?
Well, because it's not just about being, you know, your total. The question I get all the time is, well, it can't be just about being yourself, because some people are real jerks, and I don't want them to be jerks.
Yeah. So in one of the articles, Dad, that you sent out was talking about how there's this misconception that emotional intelligence means being nice. And that's absolutely not true. Emotional intelligence is just showing the truth of us. And sometimes the truth of us isn't what people want to hear. It's not nice, it's not sweet, or any of these things. And so the thing with emotional intelligence is kind of like this: how do I be a jerk without being a jerk? Right? So it's really learning how to engage in conflict, how to share the truth of you in a way that is graceful. I love the word grace when it comes to this. So if the thing we're going to say is kind of jerky, how can we say it in a more graceful way? How can we go about sharing ourselves in a way that doesn't hurt other people, but can cause conflict? And conflict's okay. Conflict just means there's two different opinions coming at each other.
Is that similar to the word that I've used all my life, tact, T-A-C-T?
I think so.
You know, I can remember someone one time saying that they defined tact as the ability to tell someone to go to hell and have them enjoy the trip. I don't know.
That's how I heard them describe politicians, a good politician. But I love that idea of how to be a jerk without being a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think 3 of the 4 of the guys on this call have mastered half of that.
That's good. You're showing good self-awareness right now, Sanjay. I'm very proud of you. That's
First
awesome.
of all, I'm gonna ask you, as we're kind of wrapping up already, but I'm gonna ask you in a second if for some resources if you have. And guys, do we know anybody that's written anything about a jerk-free workplace? I'm just.
I do.
We do. Where is it? Oh my God! Yes.
Shameless plug. Go plug.
Shameless plug.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Mike's new book.
Oh, Mike! I didn't realize you were on the cover.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
That's me right there. Yeah.
So I, before I ask you about resources, I'd be a terrible dad if I didn't somehow prod you to talk about what you actually do with executives. So Maya, how do you work with executives on emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So I do this, I share more about this in larger audiences, larger settings, but I also do one-on-one coaching. So I do one-on-one coaching via Zoom mostly, but I also have something that I call the Evolved Executive Experience, which is where I go to the executive, wherever he or she may be in the world. And it's this really intimate, deep dive. We get a house, an Airbnb in the place where he or she lives, and we take about a day and a half to really get into the nitty gritty of the childhood and work through the trauma, go through the inner child work and the somatic work. And then we start building on how to bring that new self-awareness, that new emotional intelligence into their leadership or into the workplace. And they can also bring other people on their team. Doesn't have to be just one-on-one.
Can you imagine I raised a speaker? I have no idea how that happened.
And get a word in edgewise. Question from Natasha here. It's a great question. As a leader, what is your number one tip to help employees become more self-aware?
That's a great question.
Hire Maya. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to say that out loud. I'm sorry.
I mean, having somebody come in and work on this with the core team is so powerful, because there's so much to this that it's hard to just do one thing that's going to elicit more emotional intelligence. But I guess the if I try to answer that question, it would be the curiosity that we were talking about. So creating a space where we can be like, okay, what's really going on for you right now? What did that really trigger in you? What's activated for you? What do you need? So kind of bringing that compassion into the workplace, but it's a pretty deep topic and a hard one to just give one or two tips on.
I've heard you talk about presence as well. To me, that I don't know that much about it, but it seems to me that would be a huge thing in the workplace too, just for people to be present, you know, not I don't know,
distracted and kind of everywhere.
Right.
Putting these suckers away.
Yeah, really. I mean, we live in a distraction world, right? Maya, are there? Here's the question I keep coming back to, but are there any resources you would recommend that people read or watch videos? Is there something? That
For emotional intelligence?
Start to learn more about what this is all about.
Yeah. Dr. Sam Rader is one of my teachers. She's amazing, and she's developed a whole modality of being able to trace back into our childhood what didn't go right, what didn't go well that causes us to be the way that we are.
So we're running out of time, but one more quick question. Is there anything you could tell Sanjay to be a better participant?
A better human being? Yeah. How much time do we have, right?
Listen, Maya, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was kind of last minute, and you know, it's kind of crossing that personal line, but I hope that everyone, you know, I know that everyone got a lot out of today. So thank you so much for being here. Any parting thoughts, guys? Richard, I want to turn it to you quickly just to talk about our next EO Wednesday.
Yes. Okay. So 14 days from today, which would be October the 34th. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's October the 3rd. Yeah. November the 3rd. On November the 3rd. And we will be talking about creating a rocking culture in rocky times. I've observed, many of you have observed, just a sort of malaise in some workplaces, probably brought on by the events of the last 20 months or so. I want to talk about how we can brighten that in a realistic and authentic way, but how we can turn that around and keep that culture ship from sinking any farther and really try to brighten things up. That's what we'll be talking about on October the 34th, also known as November the 3rd.
Did you say that culture, what? Ship? What'd you say?
Ship.
Oh, okay. Good. Maya, I know you've got your email address there. Is there any other way for people to reach out to you or to see your work online?
So email is the best way. I just started a YouTube channel. So I do have a masterclass that I did on what self-love really is and the 4 pillars of self-love. So I have that on my YouTube channel, which is under Maya Nicole, and it's called Me Amor Self-Love Masterclass.
Love it. Thank you. And I want to encourage everybody from all of us, please, in 2 weeks, invite a guest. We'd really like to just get our viewership up. If you haven't done so already, go to our YouTube channel, EO Wednesday, every other Wednesday, and just subscribe and like it. That would really help us.
Our goal is to get 1 million people per session. We're just a few people shy right now. So
Exactly. I
Missed
want to
it by
say
this much.
thank you to everyone. Thank you, guys. Can we play us out, Mike, with our jingle one more time?
no, because it says it's time for. We have to get a different jingle. Oh,
Oh, did I accidentally yes, of course we can. Hey, Maya, thank you so much.
thank you, Maya. That was
Thank
awesome.
you so much for having me.
Here we go, the jingle. Here it is.
What time is it? It's time for another every other Wednesday.
Yay. Bye, guys.
See you later.
See you every other Wednesday.
Bye, all.
Fortnite.
Bye.
Be safe and well out there.